Okay, just before we start, can we please have a nomination for chair? Nomination.
I nominate Councillor Darren Davies.
And can we please have a seconder?
I second.
Thank you. Over to you.
A warm welcome to those attending and also viewing, viewers watching live on YouTube. Hillingdon, London, this is a meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Darren Davies and I am chairing this meeting. Details of business to be considered today are shown on the agenda and copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of this committee will be using tablets and laptops to view the agenda today. Fire alarms, we're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point. For those of you in the room, please switch off mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them on silent. Declarations of interest, councillors. If you have any declarations of interest to make in relation to today's agenda, please ensure that you state whether it's pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and please give the reasons for your interest. Members need not declare an interest if any items on the agenda where they have already listed this on the register of interest. Furthermore, you do not need to declare an interest just because you're a ward councillor or because you are a governor. There's residents' feedbacks at the back of the room and also a link on YouTube to this. We now move on to attendees of this meeting. If we can introduce ourselves for the recording, starting with my colleague on the right.
Ryan Dowell, Democratic Services Officer.
Councillor Peter Smallwood.
Councillor Scott Farley.
Councillor Janet Gardner.
David Bruff, Chair of the Hayes Town Safer Neighbourhood Panel.
Anisha Sharma, franchisee with McDonalds.
I'm Shamil Sheikh, I'm of Council and I'm instructed to represent the applicant.
Mark Rose, Licensing Officer.
Good morning, it's Chantal MacLeod, I'm the Legal Officer for today's meeting.
And I'm Councillor Darren Davies, chairing this meeting. So, first item, apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, Chair.
Declarations of interest? No. To confirm that both parts will be in part 1 today, there will be no part 2. Is there any matters notified as urgent? No, none. Okay, let's move on to the first part, which I believe is introduction of the regulated officer and services.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. You will have received the report and agenda and will be familiar with the application. This hearing relates to an application by Rocket Restaurants Limited. The application was submitted by an agent, Mrs. Elaine Rayner from Shoesmiths LLP, on behalf of Rocket Restaurants based at McDonalds, Ironbridge, Uxbridge Road, Southall, UB1 3EG, for a late night refreshments licence for McDonalds 22 to 24, Station Road, Hayes, UB3 4DA. Their application relates to late night refreshments, 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday, 11 p.m. to midnight. This is without any seasonal variations. This would allow the selling of hot food and drink for consumption on and off the premises for that extra hour every day. The proposed opening hours being 6 a.m. to midnight throughout the week. On page 26 and 27 of the report, you can see what has been offered to support the 4 licensing objectives by the applicant. They state that what they had already was robust and, as far as reasonably practicable, secures the promotion of the licensing objectives. They detail on their application their use of CCTV, staff safe, training, partnership working policies and litter patrols. A brief timeline of events. The application was submitted on January the 17th, 2025. The application was processed and sent out for consultation on January the 20th. The application was advertised in the newspaper on January 22nd in an issue of the Uxbridge Gazette. I attended the venue on January 28th and took a photo of the blue notice on display at the restaurant in full view of passers-by. The last date for reps was set as February the 14th. During the consultation period, we received objections from 1 ward councillor and 1 from the Hayes Town Ward Safer Neighbourhood Panel. Addendum 1, which covers Appendix 7, shows the proposed conditions agreed between the licensing authority and the agent, Elaine Rayner. I now invite the committee to determine this application giving due consideration to the application and all submissions, both verbal and written. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'll open this up for questions. Do either of my colleagues have any questions?
Just for clarity, only one of the 3 ward councillors submitted, and there was no businesses or other vested parties that raised any objection.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the applicant and licence holder.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Members, you'll be aware that this application follows what has already been granted under planning permission in terms of the operating hours. So it doesn't extend beyond midnight in terms of late night refreshment licence sought. That reflects what has already been considered to some degree in terms of noise, residential amenity concerns, etc., under the granted planning permission. As Mr. Rose stated, the licensing authority agreed there is no objection and there is agreed list of conditions. There are no objections to this application from the police, for example, from nearby residents, and for confirmation, no residents live above the restaurant, for instance. In terms of those objections, I'll perhaps respond to any further oral objections in due course, but I note that the objections that have been raised are ones primarily of speculation as opposed to evidenced at present, and members, you'll be aware that there is a review mechanism such that if there are any issues in the future that are evidence, an application for a review of the licence can be made and considered at that stage. And so insofar as any potential concerns are speculative at this stage, I would request that they're not taken into account unless there are evidence. For instance, there is no evidence of antisocial behaviour, and lots of the restaurants locally have very similar operating hours. As Mr. Rose stated, page 18 of the application explains measures used in the restaurants to meet the 4 licensing objectives, and just for a brief overview, they include training of employees, they include the staff safe system, which is a rather unique and intelligent system which allows an external operator to dial into the restaurant to control any potential situations of antisocial behaviour or other incidents in terms of through the tannoy system, and to log into the CCTV and alert the authorities. The restaurant carries out, in accordance with many McDonalds restaurants, litter picks in the general area, which extends not just to McDonalds litter but also to any general litter that is encountered on those picks. The restaurant has self-closing doors to restrict noise levels. There are signs to keep the noise down and respect the residential amenity of those local in the area, and there are Binet logos on packaging. In terms of the applicant, Ms. Sharma, she owns 2 other restaurants, hopefully soon a 3rd other restaurant, so she's experienced in this area. 4th other restaurant, sorry. She's expressed an intention to join the Hillingdon Safer Neighbourhood Board to take into account any of these concerns and to make sure that the restaurant is responding accordingly. And therefore she has experience and is well versed in addressing any concerns and running a restaurant in accordance with licence conditions. I'll perhaps pause at this stage, and then if there are any further points to make in response to oral objections, I'll do so. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so do we have any questions at this time? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned other restaurants. I could just elaborate on what these other restaurants have, what the configuration of them, because I know the one that's by the Iron Bridge is an old pub, standalone. This particular one is on a high street. I'd like to know what the other ones are, how you operate those. Thank you.
So Iron Bridge is my first restaurant. It's the head office. It's where my offices are. I also own Southall Broadway, so it's classed as a drive-through, but really it's a high street restaurant because most of our business is through footfall rather than through cars, and which is a similar sort of setup to Hayes. And the one I'm going to be acquiring in a week and a half is Ealing Broadway, so it's another high street restaurant.
Yep. Okay, so the one that you got that's in Southall, that's kind of like the one that's to the Greats in Hayes. Again, it's sort of not, it's on a high street but not part of the row of shops, so to speak, as the one in Hayes is.
It's a strange one because I don't know if you've been to the Broadway recently, Southall Broadway. It's slightly set back from the actual high street. You'd have to walk in, so you couldn't just enter from the road, as it were. You have to walk into the premises. But if I was to give you a figure, we have about 10% of sales that go around the drive-through. So most of it is people walking past and then coming in. Okay.
And the other one you said, Hillingdon Broadway, is that...
That's
that a shopping parade?
That's on a parade, yes. So
right,
that's pedestrian access only.
Okay. And if I may, Chair, I just want to get some clarity, probably from Chantal, and just this clarity about planning versus licensing that was mentioned, and the noise aspect. So licensing and planning are not the same thing. I want to get some clarity, please, from officers on that. Thank you.
Indeed, planning and licensing are two separate regimes, so you'll be concentrating and focusing on licensing and promoting that. So, irrespective of what the position is with planning, you have to focus on the licensing.
Yep. Chair, if I might just add...
Sorry, one moment. We'll come back to that. Yes. So, further on, when we have you get a chance to reply, we'll do that then. Councillor Smallwood?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if I could pick up on the addendum, Appendix 7 that you sent us. There should be, point 7, there should be a minimum of 3 litter picks per day. A map of the litter pick areas, including the front of McDonalds, should be maintained, kept and updated. I just wanted to understand how that is done, how that is registered, how that is monitored, how that is checked, where it happened, because either people are like, and I don't necessarily believe this is the case, are massively dropping litter all the time in Hayes Town Centre, which I don't believe is the case. It doesn't feel like when I've been there that is something that I can reflect in and around the McDonald's. So I just wanted to understand how you monitor that and make sure that it happens.
So we have, in a restaurant which operates these hours, we tend to have 3 shifts per day. There's a morning shift, a midday shift and an evening shift. At each of those shifts, I am personally communicated by what we call a shift manager about everything that happens on that shift. So that goes from service times to waste, and I can update that to include the litter pick, so it's set in stone more. And I very frequently ask for pictures to be sent to me of things that have been done, for example, particular cleaning tasks. It wouldn't be difficult for me to also ask this. So I'm happy to include that as a standard measure.
If I may, Chair, may I also offer a suggestion? You brief mentioned that you were thinking about joining the Hillingdon Safer Neighbourhood Board. Can I suggest that you'd probably want to be joining the Hayes Town Ward Panel or the Safer Neighbourhood team that Mr. Bruff operates, because that will specifically concentrate on Hayes Town, rather. Hillingdon Safer Neighbourhood Board, which I have the pleasure of sitting on, concentrates very widely on a larger range of issues, and as much as I know it'll upset Councillor Gardner, we don't spend our entire time talking exactly about what's going on in Hayes Town. We have a wider Hillingdon context when it thinks homicides, murders, etc., etc. So it might be an idea for you to possibly, after this meeting, engage in that, if that's possible, Chair. I know we can probably come to it as a condition, but as goodwill.
I'd be more than happy to. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions which I'm going to ask now. So I just want to touch on the point in the report about youths gathering antisocial behaviour outside your premises. So I understand there's been nothing logged formally with the police. As someone who uses that area quite a lot, I've seen it. Even though it hasn't been reported, I've seen it. So what plans have you got in place for dispersal, people hanging around? And my reason for raising that is prevention of crime and disorder. So I can understand large number of youths or adults, whatever we want to say, congregating outside your entrance, which isn't a wide entrance. What is your plans for that?
So since I took over the store in March of last year, the antisocial behaviour has reduced. There were actually security guards. I think they were there almost every day. And so what I did was I just mixed up the schedule so that the youths wouldn't necessarily know when they're coming. There are certain things we do when people who are unsavoury enter the premises. So we've changed the music from regular chart music to classical music to change the tone of the restaurant. We've introduced face painting and sorry, this sounds a bit strange, but one of my managers dresses up as an animal at the weekend to get the kids in. We also close the lobby because that's where they tend to congregate. More often than not, the reason that they were allowed to gather was before it was a franchisee-owned restaurant, there was less focus on it. I am there frequently, and I encourage my managers, so my salaried staff and my shift managers, to actually be out in the lobby and not just behind the counter. And I think that's primarily where it stems from, because most of the time when people are being watched, and I've seen this in other restaurants, or even if someone just goes and stands next to them, they get very uncomfortable. They don't find it a place of respite and, to sort of make a mess or whatever it is they want to do, and they tend to leave.
Yep. My second question is, on takeaways, do you plan to actually, takeaways is the wrong answer. Let's go with online takeaway services. We'll go with them, Uber Eats, Just Eats, and there is other operators out there. What is your plan for them? Because I know that's also a big issue within the area, a number of bikes outside. Are you planning to have that right the way through till midnight, or is there a cut-off time? What is your plan for that?
I would ideally like to have it open until midnight. So in terms of where the bikes park, I can't control that. But where when you enter the restaurant, there is an area on the right, and it's basically where the courier drivers congregate and where they sit. And we've spoken to them at length, actually, just to make sure that that I feel they're an extension of our brand, whether they are part of McDonalds or whether they're Uber or Deliveroo. And I've told them what I expect from them. They in turn said that they will agree, so they behave properly when they're in the restaurant. They don't put their feet up. I don't mind them waiting there. I don't mind them sitting inside, but we try and put them to a separate side so that they're not congregating with all of the customers and they're not causing a nuisance.
Yeah.
And if they were to, there are places where I could raise that and escalate that with the actual company that they work for.
Perfect.
to follow that up.
So just to confirm on that, you'd be happy when it was later on in the evening for them to possibly wait inside the restaurant for an order rather than causing noise and nuisance outside?
They wait inside the restaurant in the day as well. No,
perfect.
I'm more than happy for them to do that.
Perfect. My final question is, just so I can get some clarity, you plan to have eat-in as well until midnight?
Yes.
Perfect. No more questions from me. Right, let's go on to responsible... Sorry, Councillor Smallwood.
No worries, Chair. Just you triggered my imagination. I just wanted to understand how many of the delivery drivers in any of your stores that you have actually banned from being able to deliver at your stores. I know that is a possibility that you're able to. If someone harasses people, behaves inappropriately, how many have you actually banned?
Probably one that's actually been banned, where we have had issues with other delivery drivers. I haven't had any at Hayes. I've had a couple in Hanwell at the Iron Bridge. I know them very well because I've been at that store for 2.5 years. I speak to them myself frequently, almost every time I go in, which is at least twice a week. I ask them how business is. I think that relationship is very important, and generally, if that relationship for some reason isn't working, again, there is a way for me to escalate that and to provide their badge and ID number and to investigate any issues that they may have caused.
Chair, and if the police or the Hayes Town Partnership or the councillors were able to provide evidence of anybody behaving inappropriately and, as a responsible person, they reported that to you, you would be happy to exclude them from your store, not just... they didn't deliver my McDonald's correctly, but if they genuinely did something that was, something that was unexpected, you would work with partners to take them off your list.
Absolutely.
It's not like there's a shortage of them.
There's not a shortage of them, and my former role was as the head of compliance at a bank, so I do care about the rules.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Sticking with the delivery drivers, I'm just looking at your diagram that's on page 35. So as you enter, so this would be the diagram on the right-hand side of the map on the right-hand side of the overall plan. You're coming into it on the right-hand side. That's where they would congregate, the drivers. Currently, how many delivery drivers you got in there at any one time?
Inside the store?
Yeah.
Tends to be about 5 at a time. Sorry. There tends to be about 5 at a time. give or take.
Right. Okay. And I like the chair, I'm very familiar with the area. I live locally. And yes, there is the issue with bikes. I appreciate that that's not directly within your power, but I have to say, even my own observations, there are people hanging about outside drivers. They're not always in the store, and they're milling about outside doing what they're doing, playing with their bikes or whatever. How when you say you bring them in, how do you encourage them to come in? Or again, just they're blocking at the pavement, they're causing pedestrians problems, wheelchairs, prams. How are you going to sort of ensure that they're not on the pavement?
Okay, so I can't ensure that they're not on the pavement. I don't think that's within my reach. But what I can do, and I'm happy to do, is to speak to them, is to put up a sign to say, do not congregate outside the front entrance. That's something that I don't think that they would be averse to. We do have a good relationship, and if I ask them to do it as a condition of, especially opening an hour later, they would be glad of the business, and I'm sure that they would be happy to accommodate.
If I may say, just finally, when you say, so the 5, is that sort of peak time, is that sort of during the day, is that your sort of currently your night operation?
I would call it an average, because I could go in the morning and there might be 2, I could be there at lunchtime and there might be 6, and in the evening it could be between 4 to 8, depending on which day it is, what the hour is, and how busy the store would be.
Okay, thank you.
Just double check, no further questions? No. Okay, we'll move on to responsible authorities. There isn't any here. So we'll move on to other parties. Let's go Councillor Gardner first.
We've all seen what I've written in Appendix 3. I'm intrigued about saying that nothing happens. I live in the ward that I represent. McDonalds is still a place to meet up outside if you're selling drugs. That's known. That's the word on the street. The alley next door to McDonald's is used as a urinal by the guys on the mopeds who are sitting there. I'm intrigued to say that, I think on the last time I was doing the ward surgery, there were 16 bikes parked along there. If you talk to any of the drivers, they're incredibly rude. If you say, could you move out of the way, please, there's a pram, blah, 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 blah. I don't know how you're going to get them to sit in the premises. I know there are no residents living above there, but there are residents living over the road, and I'm actually amazed that the local police haven't confirmed any of this, because there has been a great deal of trouble there. There've been knives have been seized. I think there's some recently. I don't know. David can fill in all that bit, but I'm personally worried about the residents and the rubbish as well. It's great that you have rubbish pickers. I've never seen them, but obviously I don't hang about the town all the time. But I just, if people leaving their rubbish, it's not just at the front of the building, it's further up by the Hesse Centre. You find stuff in the car park by St Anselm's, even in Clayton Road. I don't know, and the idea of it being open for an extra hour in the evening is basically waiting for trouble. And yes, I know it's all based on assumptions, but that's what I've got to say. And also, I wrote this on behalf of all 3 ward councillors, because I'm the one that gets to the emails first. Okay, thank you.
Okay, what we'll do, we'll take questions now for Councillor Gardner, and then we're going to David Bruffer after. So, yep, Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand that, hearing many of the concerns that Councillor Gardner has as a diligent ward councillor, which of the licensing objectives is she concerned about with the relation of the 1 hour extension?
Prevention of public nuisance, and also the prevention of crime and disorder. And the prevention of public nuisance goes across the delivery drivers or moped people, as well as people outside, just hanging about, just doing whatever they do.
Do you have a comeback on that, Councillor Smallwood? No. Councillor Farley, do you have any questions?
what you're saying about the alleyway. There's nothing above. I believe that there are properties adjacent in the next building along, or the next property along. There's properties there. Have you had any comments from residents in the immediate vicinity of the area? I am aware of the issues of use and so forth. I wonder what kind of resident feedback you've been getting.
I've had quite a lot of people who've just basically complained about the noise from the drivers sitting on their mopeds. They have some sort of music blaring out as well, and also the abuse that some of the residents have had when I think it was one evening, I think it was about 9 o'clock, I'm not 100% sure because the person rang me and said that she'd asked a guy to move, and I won't say, he told her to off.
I do apologise for anyone listening on YouTube for that comment. Okay. Just in case it was misunderstood, we do apologise. Councillor Gardner, I have one question before we move on to Mr Brough. Them reports that you had from residents regarding the mopeds, are we sure they were going to McDonalds and they wasn't going to the other delivery establishments within the area?
I'm pretty sure they were hanging about outside McDonald's because we have problems with the other delivery drivers hanging about outside the other food outlets.
But we couldn't be 100% sure that they were from McDonald's. That's just
not 100% sure, but...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Small?
Just for clarity, we didn't get anything from other than Councillor Gardner and on behalf of her colleagues as well, and Mr Brough, we didn't get anything from any residents or the police at all on this.
I'll bring Mark in on that one.
I just wanted to...
Nothing at all, just those two raps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. Mr Brough?
Thank you very much. If I just say the Hayes Town Safer Neighbourhood panel is made up of representatives of residents, places of worship, and also representatives of local business. So the chair of the Hayes Town Business Forum is a member of the panel. At our meeting on the 22nd of January, the issue of the application was raised and it was agreed unanimously to lodge an objection. There were 19 people present at that meeting, covering all of those areas that I've said. We don't have any objection to McDonald's in Hayes. We realise McDonald's is very popular. It's really about the impact on the locality and the safety of young people in particular. What's distinctive about McDonald's compared to the other eating premises is it's very popular with young people. It has the highest number of home delivery drivers out of any other place in Hayes. And the home deliveries, as the subcommittee's heard, that does generate a lot of impact on the locality, particularly in relation to the people at the front of the building and in the alleyway. And I note from the appendix, the litter, I have actually seen staff clearing the litter in the front of the premises, but the drivers often stand in the alleyway, and the alleyway is littered, and that's not cleared. But our particular issue on the drivers, I did actually take a photograph of the number of bikes parked in front of there, because every day there are at least a dozen. On the day I took my photograph, there were 14, and I was challenged by one of the drivers in a very threatening manner about why was I taking a photograph, and I told him I had every right to take a photograph in a public place. I was taking the photograph because I've been working with Councillor Gardner on trying to get something done about the parking of those delivery vehicles, because they are taking up places that are meant for shoppers, and that's why the businesses are upset about this throughout the day and right into the night time. That those are parking places for shoppers, not for delivery bikes. But coming back to the young people issue, over the years there's been incidents in the restaurant where it's become a focal point for groups to descend on the restaurant, often after school, but sometimes in the evening as well. And there have been serious situations developing where, as Councillor Gardner mentioned, young people have been found with knives, and they're not just in front of the restaurant, they get down the side of the restaurant and in the land to the back of the restaurant as well. These incidents have been very threatening to other young people and also to the general public. There have been scuffles and threats and arrests. I think the reason that the local police have not lodged a formal objection is that these incidents I'm describing don't happen all the time. They become like a honeypot every so often. And so in terms of statistics, there probably aren't a lot of statistics, but when the gatherings happen, they are serious for all concerned. And as stated in our objections, we believe that the best way of preventing crime and disorder, public nuisance and protecting children and young people is to have door supervisors present at all times. Because every time we've had these incidents that I've referred to, things have really got out of control. We've had police having to stand outside the place trying to make sure the groups don't start a fight. What's happened is as soon as the supervisors come, everything calms down. But for whatever reason, they are only in there for a temporary period, a few weeks or a few months, and then they go. Our belief, the extra hour at night, we can't prove it, as the applicant's representative said. We are speculating in a sense, but we are looking at crime prevention. We are saying that we would call upon McDonalds to be cautious in extending the hours, and the best way of reassuring the public, reassuring the safety of the young people, would be to have the door supervisors there all the time. And the door supervisors could actually help deal with the issues that the subcommittee's been informed on, the drivers. Because if you've got door supervisors, they can actually see, are the drivers outside playing loud music, are the drivers harassing the public? They can fulfil that double function. But the litter could be covered. One of the conditions I see in the appendix that was circulated yesterday about the litter, I would hope that the map includes the alleyway, not just the front of the premises, because the alleyway is in a disgusting state at the moment. It's privately owned, so the council can't clear it, and as the members of the subcommittee will know, the council's powers in relation to litter on private land are long and convoluted, and you have to serve notices and so on. Just adding the alleyway to the litter pick area would actually be a real public service. But the guys shouldn't really be accumulating litter or standing there anyway, according to the conditions. But the reality is, as Councillor Gardner said, we have, I've not seen it personally, but the residents have mentioned about men standing, urinating against the wall. Now, I accept that all those things I've said about the bikes and the people, I can't say all of those are McDonalds, because there are other companies that do deliveries. But the largest number of deliverers in Hayes are McDonalds, because it's got good business, it's producing what the public want, and good luck to them. You know, they're doing a good trade. But all we're asking as the Safer Neighbourhood panel is be cautious, do something a bit extra to provide reassurance to the public and to the users of the restaurant by having the door supervisors there all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open to questions. Councillor Smallwood?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand from a legal perspective, we are here to grant potentially a new licence that's an extra hour, not to go back and review an entire licence and look at it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. It is, I think the right word, it's not pleasant to hear further testimony about abuse being sort of handed out by drivers. I appreciate they are not McDonald's drivers, they are other people, but these people are coming into contact with members of the public. The alleyway, that, as the representative for the S&T panel, that obviously that's not McDonald's land, that's some private land. Do we know what is, this may come later on, but in terms of what's back there, I think there's some sort of garage or something. But obviously there will be waste bins and other things from the access point for McDonald's to get through. So part of that the alleyway and the access at the back will be McDonald's responsibility from that point of view. What kind of response, so when you had your S&T panel, police were there, presumably the representatives, that they, what did they speak about with regards to the alleyway?
Yes, the alleyway is privately owned. It's owned by the people that used to run World Wines. People who know Hayes will remember Mr. O'Bry. Became Liquor 38 latterly, but always known as World Wines. He owns the alleyway and the land immediately behind McDonald's. So he's a person that council has to serve notice on to clear the litter. In relation to the police, the police have confirmed that this is the Safer Neighbourhood team who were present at this meeting. The Safer Neighbourhood team totally understand the reasons that the panel is objecting. It was the licensing part of the police obviously haven't objected, but the police confirmed what I was saying, that the back of the area behind is used by people hanging about, and that's where they did actually disarm somebody with a knife, was in the alleyway behind the shop rather than to the side of the shop.
Councillor Farley, then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. And you mentioned that I mean, I am also aware that this has been the case, but you mentioned about police standing guard outside in previous occasions. The applicant took over this establishment in March 2024. Was that before that date or after that date?
I haven't got a log of when these incidents happened, so I can't directly answer. I didn't know that there had been a change in management. I'm certainly aware that in the past that when problems have happened, often there's been a change in the branch manager, the person in day-to-day supervision of the shop. But I'm not able to give a log of when those incidents, but they happened more than enough times to cause the sort of concerns that led to our panel lodging the objection.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you very much, and please don't think that I don't take these things incredibly seriously and recognise some of the concerns of Mr Brough and Councillor Gardner in my own ward, but I just wanted to understand, is there any particular issues between 11 and midnight in Hayes Town Centre that make you object to this in between that particular added hour? Because we are looking at this added hour, and I'm really keen to draw us back to what is on the papers, as important as the other issues are, and I'm sure there'll be some good conversations afterwards and discussions with the police. But from a licensing perspective, is there particular concerns that you think the committee should take into account between the 11 and 12 extension, from experience at Papa John's, the Botwell Inn and other establishments that are open past 11 o'clock?
I don't think, that was speculation as well about what's happening, what might happen if they open. I can't say that I've got clear evidence that this will tip things over the edge, but just by having more people around circulating in the town, it adds to issues late at night. There are people who tell us that they fear going through the town at night time because of gatherings of people. So it would add to that. And I come back to what I said, if it is approved that by having a presence of a trained, qualified supervisors, then that helps calm things, and that's in everybody's interest.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, you did indicate, I know it's not normal, but I will let you speak.
Can I just say, regarding the operating hours between 11 and 12, I consider myself to be quite a decent councillor, but I do get scared on occasions, and I decided when my youngest son, who's built like a brick outhouse, was around, if he'd like to walk down to the town with me, it was about 11:30 at night. We wandered out. There were lots of people hanging about. There were a lot of people. I have no idea where they'd been, where they were going, but they're not going from the station to the bus stop or going from the station to the bus stop home. They were literally hanging about. Some of them were drinking, which annoys me a bit because I thought it was a no drinking zone. But they were also abusive. Now, my son is rather large, and several of the people said to him, "Oh, you think you're hard, do you?" I mean, sorry. And they were not, they were young adults. We're not talking about proper adults. And that's what worries me, because it would be another place for those sort of people to gravitate.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so now what we will do, we'll move on to the discussion-led part of the subcommittee. So all discussion needs to come through the chairman, guys, just to remind you of that. And this is an opportunity for interested parties, etc., to make comments on stuff that's been mentioned. Okay? Yep.
Thanks, Chair. If I might just respond to some of those comments, I hope that will assist and perhaps offer some answers. So in the first, a question was asked about the distinction between planning and licensing regime. The point in which I raised planning was that as part of a planning application, of course, a noise assessment will be part of that, will be considered. That's not a suggestion that, of course, members aren't entitled to consider noise separately as part of this licensing decision too. It's merely a point to raise that noise has also separately to be considered, and it is a relevant material consideration that's been taken into account in granting planning permission for the relevant operating hours. That's the reason I raised it, but members, of course, are entitled wholeheartedly to consider that as part of this application too. The second point about drivers, of course, a lot of representations that have been raised are about the behaviour of others, which the applicant only can control or influence to a certain extent. Insofar as people hanging about in town is concerned, if that's generally an issue, that's not something that cumulatively this application is going to perhaps affect. One of the helpful points is that there are a number of other establishments, businesses, restaurants open past midnight and up to midnight. That includes Chaiwalla open till midnight, Rooster Spot 3 AM, Love Dessert 3 AM, the Botwell Inn 1 AM, Royal Chicken 2 AM and 3 Bites 7:30. So there are a number of other establishments already open, which does set a precedent, some quite significantly past the midnight that this application seeks. The second point about drivers, of course, some of the points are about drivers generally, which would perhaps continue irrespective of this application, because they are in relation to what is already granted, where the operating hours that sit outside of this licence application. Perhaps the suggestion of providing signage outside of the restaurant to encourage drivers to come into the restaurant, as the applicant suggested, might actually be a betterment. So as a result of this application, if signage was put up to encourage drivers to go in, generally including throughout the day and not just 11 till midnight as part of these application hours, that would actually encourage drivers generally to behave better. But of course you've also heard from Ms Sharma the management techniques used and the open dialogue and communication with drivers, and her devotion to ensuring that drivers do behave as properly as possible insofar as she is able to influence that decision. The third point is in relation to the alleyway, because much has been made of the alleyway. Of course, the alleyways which are not owned by McDonalds are not within the control of the applicant, and therefore if there are any ongoing issues in respect of those alleyways, that really ought to be dealt with through other mechanisms, whether that's through waste notices or indeed through the Town and Country Planning Act notices with untidy land that affects residential amenity of an area. So there are other mechanisms to deal with that, but I would suggest that doesn't fall within the scope of the application considerations because it's not owned by the applicant, it's privately owned. And that also similarly is the case in terms of litter picking, because of course McDonald's employees can't go onto private land to litter pick, but they can do general public litter picking. The fourth point is about, again, I won't reiterate the point in detail, but of course there is no police objection, and although Councillor Gardner's raised points about discussions with local residents and members of the community, there aren't any representations from local residents. If there were, then that could have been considered properly and appropriate in terms of noise, but the suggestion is that local residents who live very close aren't concerned about this application from a prevention of nuisance perspective because they haven't raised any representations to that effect. In terms of the representations that have been raised, Mr. Bruff's representations perhaps quite fairly say in his final paragraph that currently the situation at the premises is relatively calm, and so there aren't any statistics of crime and antisocial behaviour that can be produced to back up the panel's concerns. And I would suggest that that probably reflects some of the measures that Ms Sharma's taken in terms of, since ownership, trying to decrease antisocial behaviour through some of the mechanisms and management tactics that she's employed, but also more generally that there are speculative concerns, and again insofar as any of those concerns do come to realisation, then a review application can be made and can be considered appropriate in due course. Finally, in respect of the suggestion of having door supervisors at all times of the day, of course Ms Sharma's already indicated that actually the current mechanism that's being employed whereby door supervisors are put at random periods so that no one can predict is, I would suggest, a proportionate approach, but also an effective approach because it ensures that there is some presence, but ultimately that is at the discretion of the manager and the owner, depending on the levels of antisocial behaviour, but more importantly it means that there, in terms of cost perspective, it would be unreasonable to require door supervisors all of the day. However, utilising this tactic where there is certain periods or certain times to show that there is a presence to some extent, when it's needed of course, depending on antisocial behaviour more generally, which has decreased since her ownership, that would be a suitable way, which is already being utilised and which will continue to be utilised. So, to that extent, the measures that are already adopted and utilised by the applicant address these points effectively. And Ms Sharma's indicated, indeed, that antisocial behaviour has decreased as a result of that since her ownership. So I'll pause at that stage, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Chair, just three observations. I'd be interested, if possible, you're open, I think going to be, if we grant this, you'll be open 126 hours in a 7-day week. I hope my maths quickly done there on the calculator was correct. But how many of those hours on an average week, would there be door staff at the random times? Possibly one for Mark or Chantel to understand, other than the Botwell Inn, where I assume there's alcohol served, or they've got a very strange business, all of the others probably don't serve alcohol after 11 o'clock, so they're all food-based businesses. How many of the food-based businesses currently have door staff at any time in the day? And I'm especially interested after the 11 o'clock. And just an observation, I actually think a lot of this could have been solved offline between interested parties. I think there's loads of good practice across the borough around where ward panels, councillors, businesses have sort of have come together. So I think some of this could be, and it seems that there is some good feeling in the room for potentially some good offline discussions to be had to make sure that things like when Uber Eats and other offering drivers misbehave, they can be banned. That we can look at, making sure that the door staff are rotated in a way maybe that the ward panel feels comfortable with, etc., etc. So just that. So just the two questions and the observation. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just add on to Councillor Smallwood's question there? Can we do sit-down restaurants, not just takeaway, sit-down restaurants that have door supervisors? Because I believe the McDonald's restaurant is a sit-down restaurant, whereas some of the others that you've named are takeaway options. So let's make the park fair as fair as we can. So if you do have any data on that, it'd be wonderful to know. If you don't, I respect that. Yep. Councillor Farley, do you have anything?
I do, but I thought
I think we're going to get Mark some time.
Other responses are going to come first.
From the
Okay, we'll go. Mark, do you have anything at the moment?
So it's difficult for me to be specific about your question directly, because with licensing we wouldn't have any distinction between sit down or takeaway necessarily.
Yep.
But in answer to your question, Councillor Smallwood, in the close vicinity, in the premises that are licensed, there are 4 that you can see that have got late night refreshments. So that's hot and cold, hot drinks, hot food between 11 and 5. As you said, 2 of them are public houses, 2 of them are restaurants. Salvador, Piri Piri and Papa John's. I don't know off the top of my head if they do sit-in. I don't know. So out of those 4, only 1 has got SIA. The Old Crown specifically has in their licence that they have to do it on a risk-assessed basis. So that's the best I can do.
Perfect, yeah. Applicant, do you have anything to add to the 120 hours of door staff?
It's currently around 10 hours a week.
Okay. Councillor Small, would you have a follow-up on that?
I just think if there is hotspot times when we think antisocial behaviour is taking place, the applicant should have a discussion with the Hayes Ward panel, which is very ably led by Mr. Bruff, because that would be the ideal times to have them there.
Okay. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. There's been some comment about residents that have not put their names forward. I would necessarily argue that we have got representation. A ward councillor does represent residents, so that is a representation of residents' concerns. And obviously, Mr. Bruff has a number of interested parties as part of that SMT. So I wouldn't sort of dismiss the fact that there's no named individual from a resident as a barrier to that. Just to make that point. The alleyway, yes, I appreciate it's not within the control. I appreciate that drivers are one thing and the restaurant is another. I think we all acknowledge that McDonald's has a very widely known and successful brand, so it will, you will have more people, and presumably you want more people as part of this, more revenue, more sales, etc. The litter picking is a concern. I mean, yes, we have got McDonald's elsewhere, but it is some distance away from the town centre. But we do see it. It's the litter all over the place. That isn't necessarily an issue because of the driver. The driver's taking it to someone's house, and hopefully they're putting it in their own litter bin at home. This is more to do with the issues of people coming in to your premises and taking away eating. We've heard that there are people in the town centre. Who's to say what they're up to? You know, for good or ill, they're there. But an extra hour will generate more sales, will generate more, potentially more rubbish that's being dropped, and that's not necessarily immediately outside your premises, but in the wider area. We have got nearby parks, which sadly do get littered. I have seen, refuse with McDonald's branding in there. I don't really sort of go into the conditions too much because it's something for the future. But I would be interested about the area, because you say that there's a map. I don't know if this map exists currently, or this is something that you would develop as part of a condition. But I would be interested to how close to your premises this litter picking would be being done. Is it just going to be the stretch of shops outside, or are you going to be going sort of further around the town centre?
So typically we would clear out the rubbish in the alley as well.
Okay.
So some of that also comes from Chaivala, because their back door comes out to that car park, that sort of alley from the two car garages that I think they own the land. So that's what we would do as a matter of course throughout the day. To do wider litter picks, that's something that I tend to arrange in all of the stores. That's on an ad hoc basis. That's not something that we could commit to. Just in terms of business costs and expenses, it's not something I could regularly commit to go further up and down the high street, as it were. But it is something I'm interested in doing more frequently. But in terms of a daily commitment to go 3 times, including round the alleyway, absolutely.
If I may, Chair, so just to be clear, does this map exist at the moment, or it doesn't? It's something you would develop if this condition was applied?
I haven't seen the map.
I think it's something that will be developed in accordance with the condition, yes.
Right, okay. Again, just so we've got some clarity to understand. So there's the alleyway immediately adjacent to the property. The current litter picks are just basically outside your shop front and the alleyway, or how far do you go from?
They include the alleyway.
Yes.
But I want to make clear that there's a lot of rubbish from Chaivala as well,
yes,
which I have previously reported to the council, because there is overspill, and we have cleaned that up several times in the past. I'm happy to enforce more strongly that the 3 litter picks will include the alleyway every day. That's fine.
Okay, so again, I'm just trying to understand in terms of when you refer to a map, it's suggesting further afield than just outside immediately your premises. That's why I'm trying to understand what the map would be.
I don't know about the map. Sorry.
It's listed in the condition. Sorry.
There's reference, I think, in condition 7 to make sure it's sufficiently precise. So I think there would be a map to be agreed, basically, as part of condition 7. But yes, insofar as the current litter picks are concerned, my understanding is that they're relatively localised. Right. There wouldn't be wider on a 3 times a day basis. But Ms. Sharma's suggesting that there could be some more general ad hoc wider litter picks, but that would be difficult to secure by way of condition because obviously the cost and time involved in that.
I appreciate that, and thank you. I just want to be clear about what this condition is proposing. Yes. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Farley, Councillor Smallwood? No? Okay, I have a few, so let's go with the first one. Let me just bring them up. How many litter bins, external litter bins, are you going to provide?
We don't have any external litter bins.
Is there any way that we could add them?
Sorry, can we ask you to turn the mic on again?
Just turn your mic on, sorry.
Sorry, I assume this would be done by the council because it's on the street. We don't own the land in front of the...
Is there a way we could attach them to the outside of your... No, sorry, there isn't. It's all glass. Sorry. Yes. Okay, my second question. What arrangements for waste collection and stock deliveries does the premises have at the moment? Because we've already heard that it's quite congested outside, so do you have a delivery management plan, etc. in place?
The current delivery plan has been in place
since before I took over the store. That hasn't changed, it won't change. It's not something I can affect because of the supply chain and the logistics involved with the number of McDonald's that an external company deal with.
So there's no plans to review it at the moment, no?
No.
Okay, thank you. The shared alleyway, it bugs me a bit because I understand the land isn't yours, but you obviously have right of access to get to the back of your building. So I know you've agreed to add additional litter picking. Is there a way that you could put lights on the side of your building to light that alley up? Because I understand from listening here, it's dark in the evenings, and if we had additional lighting along there, may prevent people using it as I quote, a urinal.
So I think it's meant to be locked, because when I've gone there at night, there are times when it has been locked and there are times when it hasn't been locked.
Right.
We have an area behind, which is about 3 feet from our back door, where we have our bins, our corral that we call it. So that's where we house all of our waste. Perhaps it's possible to speak to the owners of the alleyway, to the 2 car businesses, and encourage them to keep it locked. Oh, I don't know who it's owned by. Who's it owned by?
Okay, through me, guys. Sorry. We'll come back to that, but that may be a conversation for you guys to have.
I think, Chad, that's probably a sensible conversation. It's probably one that needs to be offline, as opposed to something that can be secured by conditions.
No, that's why I'm
quite happy. Yes, I think we're quite happy to take that one away and discuss that offline. Yeah,
fine. I'd accept that. The incident with a knife, I'll open this to both sides. I just want to confirm that when the police disarmed someone with the knife, that didn't come from McDonald's. They wasn't in the McDonald's building, they were just found in the alley when they were disarmed, yeah?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, my final question, well, I've got 2 more. The staff safe system you use, can I just confirm that it's still the old system? You hit the button, activates an alarm, CCTV goes live, the building is mic'd?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And are you in a long-term agreement to have that? Is that part of your McDonald's agreement?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And my final, it's just a comment to the ward councillor. And we understand that the business's hands are tied a lot with the mopeds, the delivery drivers. It may be a suggestion to make that ward priority at your ward panel, and that could help resolve some issues, because I understand ward panels can make ward priorities. I'll leave that there. Does anyone have any questions? Yep, Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the proposed conditions, we spoke earlier about, again, delivery drivers, so number 10. When we spoke a moment ago, you did say that you don't have any powers to do anything with the drivers, but this does say delivery drivers shall be instructed to respect the needs of local residents, including remaining inside the premises. So are we saying with that condition that if they don't come in to your store to keep away from the pavement, etc., they basically will not be able to engage or transact with your business? Or is there some sort of, again, I'm trying to make sure that we understand what it is that's written here and what it is requiring of you should this be accepted.
My understanding of that condition is essentially to require the applicant and all managers, etc., to engage with delivery drivers to tell them where to go in the way that's currently being utilised in any event. Insofar as being able to control them, obviously Ms. Sharma's indicated that there's a level of influence that can be that can be adopted with them, but we can't control them. So I think it goes insofar as there's an obligation on us to try to encourage them to come into the restaurant, and indeed that could be, and probably most likely is going to be verbally, but there might be an element of signage as well as part of this. But ultimately, if they choose not to, we can't force them to come in or push them in. So I think there's probably a balancing act, but the obligation is on us as opposed to the delivery drivers.
Okay, Councillor Smallwood.
Just to follow up on Councillor Farley's point around the delivery drivers, I think often they learn their lessons when pointed out that one of their friends has been banned or stopped from delivering, and that certainly has solved some of the issues elsewhere in the borough. I wondered whether the applicant would be open, if the committee was minded later, to add an F, that you'll keep a record of complaints about delivery drivers and the action taken that can be provided to the police, and potentially, maybe not their name and their number and everything, because I don't necessarily think that's appropriate, but the top line figures of the Hillingdon Safer Neighbourhood Panel, the Hayes Town Safer Neighbourhood Panel, so that they can see that proactive action is taken. I don't know whether that would be something that you would be prepared to consider as a condition, and I think that will alleviate some of the very valid points Councillor Farley made.
Yes, I'd be very happy to do that. We do keep a log, regardless of any incidents inside the store, relating to staff, relating to customers, related to delivery drivers, and I'd be happy to share that information, yes.
Thank you. I just think, you only said one, I think a stronger hand on the tiller on that one has solved issues elsewhere.
Yep. Okay, any further questions from anyone? Okay, we'll move on to closing remarks. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Just to, again, clarify, the rear of the premises, because we don't know what's back there, I'd just like to understand what exactly is behind the premises that's from your control aspect, from the bins, etc., and if there's any change in process, so waste removal, etc., that may differ should this extra hour be granted.
There shouldn't be any change in terms of that schedule. So at the back of the store is a double door, it's a fire door. There is a gap, a car could go through, and then it's what we call our corral. So it's an enclosed space, maybe 5 by 2-3 meters squared. One of my managers parks his car there, and then we've got 3 or 4 bins on the side. That's maintained, and we clean that, and that's our responsibility. There's a car park to the right, and in front there are 2 separate car garages.
Anything further? No? Okay, so we'll go to closing remarks. We'll start with Mark.
Nothing from me, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything, Chantel?
Nothing from me.
Councillor Smallwood? Councillor Farley? Councillor Gardner? No. Mr. Bruff? Closing remarks, so please brief.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of the alleyway, the applicant said there was a gate that was locked at night. The gate was vandalised some years ago. It's not lockable. It might be something that we could talk about, reinstating a gate, because that would then keep the area safe for everybody. In terms of the litter, I was pleased to hear the applicant say that the staff do clear the alleyway. They certainly haven't done it recently. It's looking disgusting at the moment. I had a member of the public sent me an email about it only last week. And taking the applicant's representative's point, it's private land, but if you need the permission of the owner, I can give you his contact details through the council to... Okay,
so that's potentially a conversation offline there.
Yeah, but lastly, coming back to the main point of concern that I come back to is about the door supervisors, and our request would be taking account of the fact they're not there every hour of every day, as a piece of public reassurance. Could the applicant say that if you do grant this extra hour, that the extra hour should be subject to the door supervision?
Okay, thank you very much. And now applicant.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, I think the discussions have been helpful in respect of the alleyway. I don't quite know who owns it. That's probably something we need to take offline. But insofar as introduction of a gate, for instance, could help alleviate some of these concerns, that, of course, can be taken offline and dealt with separately. In respect of door supervision, I think I have made the point already that the current system that's already engaged, which reflects the extent to which there is or are concerns of antisocial behaviour and responds accordingly in terms of the hours and the way in which they're stagmented, is already one that's effective. And so I'd suggest that can merely continue, but also take into account the additional hour if this application is granted. So in the first instance, I think the current mechanism that's utilised can continue. If indeed there are any concerns in due course and a condition seemingly needs to be imposed, that perhaps can be subject to a review at a later stage, but insofar as the evidence before us at the time being, I'd suggest that that's not necessary.
Okay. Any further comment from yourself?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. So now what will happen is the subcommittee will remain in the room. Everyone else will be asked to leave, and we will go into deliberation. I just want to thank everyone for coming today and taking part and for your time. Also would like to wish Councillor Haggar a speedy recovery, because I believe she's unwell at the moment. And thank you very much. Thank you.